Those of you who've been here before, many of you have, you know Mark Hurd already. You know that we'll be standing up during this interview. I don't know where we're going to go yet, but the table's out of the way.
A lot of room.
Scott's done that, so we're good. Have a runway here. I'm very happy to say that although Mark is in his quiet period again, he's agreed. It was actually his idea.
Just define quiet period. Meaning we're very close to the end of our quarter.
Right.
And so I have lots of lawyers that don't want me to say much. That's what quiet period.
Specifically about how the company is doing financially this quarter. So we won't do that. And you won't do that either. But you are going to be welcome to ask questions, which is the first time we've done that, which is really great. And so at the end, we'll leave a good amount of time. You can start thinking now, and we'll let you have a shot at Mark at the end. And I want to start by saying now, Oracle, we know Oracle. We've all seen Oracle grow up. And it's doing okay, it seems like. It's you know, over time.
Good news. That's good news.
It's good news.
Good news.
And I understand that Oracle is close to the moment when it becomes the largest market cap company. You want to finish that sentence?
Well, yeah, I think we'd say that we'd be the largest market cap company in enterprise tech. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's this.
Not that we're watching.
Not that anyone cares.
No.
There's other companies called IRS or ISL, IBM. That's what
IBM.
Yeah. They're pretty close.
It's very close.
50 cents difference.
Yeah, I mean, their stock is about $1 billion for every dollar. Ours is about $4.5 billion for every dollar. And my guess is this morning we're probably 50 cents apart.
If you guys each buy one share.
So if everybody would get out, ORCL is the ticker. 50 cents. We'll have a lot of press over
then
the
Mark will be running the largest cap market. Okay.
Be big.
So congratulations. Just
we haven't done anything yet, Mark. This will jinx it, but we just listen. I think the good news for us is that we were probably $100 billion in market cap just 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So our incline, we've almost not quite doubled our market cap. But we've done it while doing a lot of things to change the company as we've been doing it. Yeah,
you guys have been pretty agile. I think we've watched you do the cloud thing and a lot of going on. We're going to talk about some new cloud things today. I'm impressed by, and you know this already, by your ability to manage all this, because there aren't that many people in the world who have the experience in management to be able to. It's a very large organization. There's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, and you seem to do it. It's probably hard.
I'm not going to comment. I'll just say thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So let's look for a minute at the whole. I mean, we just had an IoT conversation up here on stage.
Right.
I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you. You did a letter for us. Thank you for SNS on the Internet of Things, and I'd like to kind of go beyond that letter. We can cover that, but mainly look at the idea of people in a different way than you did there. There you kind of looked at how to get good employees in the next generation and stuff. I'd like to talk about how you see people and what role Oracle will have in dealing with people as this IoT blows up.
Well, I think it's a complicated subject, and that's why it's hard to write it down, I think, because there's so many factors. If I forget Oracle for a second, and I just go to the secular factors that affect us, it's bigger than this Internet of Things. It gets to this comments about the explosion of data. This is a blessing and a curse, all at the same time. And you have to intersect that, I think, with also what's going on in social. The fact that social, which I don't believe is a hobby, I believe this is this method of communicating and talking is going to change everything we do. And the fact that now we're entering a new era with all this data of transparency, and every one of your warts, well, all of ours, are going to be out there in the public domain. It used to be that whenever you had an issue, it was between you and the company. Now it's between you and everybody you know in the company.
Right.
And the same thing's going to be true when you're hiring. When you're hiring or in a customer relationship, this dearth of data is going to turn into a real challenge for all of us. And so this Internet of Things is, to me, only one aspect of many that are going to affect the way we live, the way we sell, the way we service, the way we hire. It's going to change about everything we do.
Yeah. So a lot of people have talked about the idea of advertising, mobile advertising, what's going to happen as more and more phones get hooked up and all that. I think that's been covered. But I'm curious, when you look at the people side of this, what's the psychology? But how do you see, as we go into the Internet of Things, we go into a world where there are already, as Chet mentioned this morning, there are already more phones than there are people on the planet now. We discussed yesterday, there's a huge problem with fraud. There's a huge problem with security. There's a huge problem with, and you guys are going to be gatekeepers in a way, because it's your database. It's your, you're not the phone company, but in a lot of places you are going to have our data.
In many cases, the phone company has a lot of Oracle technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yes.
So how do you move that forward and reduce the risk for us?
Listen, I think this whole issue, you're in it's a very complex issue about how you market going forward, and then how you protect that data. There's going to be an incredible zest on the part of companies to own their marketing data. You talked about ad agencies. I think you're going to see a change where companies want to own that process. They want to own that connection with the customer. When I grew out of business school, I got trained on things that are probably no longer true. I was trained to, 95% customer set. I mean, did anybody go to B school in circa 1980? I did. Yeah. So I got trained that 95% customer sat was perfect. Mm-hmm. And once you got past 95, it was uneconomic to chase 96, 97, 98, because you always had professional churners and complainers, et cetera, et cetera. So just let them be. Well, that made a bit of sense probably in 1980. I don't think it does now, because it'll take our case. We have a little less than 500,000 customers. We're B2B. If we have 5% unhappy customers, that's 25,000 people that are now tweeting, making YouTube videos. They're on Facebook. I mean, I got a real problem. Mm-hmm. I could have 475,000 happy customers and 500,000 or 25,000 customers that are telling everybody they know. So now that rule, I'm not sure makes sense. And I'm not sure it's going to be better, Mark, to just do better handling the 5% unhappy. I think you're going to want to be in a mode where you never get the 5%. Mm-hmm. You're going to want to do a better job understanding who you're selling to and what the resulting relationship is going to be. I don't know that I want to third-party that process out.
What you're describing is a world where there's a deeper relationship.
Deeper, and maybe I'll say it differently, a better understanding of who you're about to get in the relationship with.
Yep. And then, so more due diligence on who it is, and then a longer-term, deeper relationship once it's done.
I think so.
And the assumption that they're all going to be happy because you did that.
I think so.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of where I'm trying to head with this. So that's a very personal thing, even if it's a B2B story. There's somebody behind that B2B. There's a person on the other end of that telephone who's making buying decisions for you, about you. And that relationship, whoever that person is, has got to be a deeper, longer-term relationship in this kind of world, I think. Yeah. Does that sound right?
I think it gets more complicated, of course, when you go B to C.
C, yeah. Harder to do that.
Well, I mean, listen, you and I talked one time about my favorite phone company example.
Yep.
And I can't resist.
We all have them.
You all have? I have one of these. I bet everybody does. I'll give you guys a pop quiz. How many times has your service provider sent you a message on this that says, "Hi, Mark"? Well, they wouldn't say "Hi, Mark" because my name's Mark, but they'd say, "Hi, you're in France. I know your data plan is usually this. I know your voice plan is usually that. I know where you are. What about this? This might be a little more economic, or it might give you a little more bandwidth." How many of you have gotten a nice personalized message like that? 6, 7, so about 10. You know what? How many times I've gotten one? 0. I've gotten one 0. And I got to find out who your service provider is, if they've really customized a thing to you, because mine, which is one of the big name carriers, has never sent me anything. And I think if somebody did, I'd change. And I think the same thing's going to be true in banks. My bank has tried to sell me, let me say not sell me, they can't even connect to me, let alone give me, I'm talking about a holistic view of my relationship with the bank. And I'll tell you that over time, that will change market share.
We had this conversation on the phone, but I'm going to agree with you. I won't name names, but I have a carrier. This is a true story. Mm-hmm. I was in a conference. I couldn't answer the phone. They texted me 2 or 3 times. I didn't answer. I knew it was, and I knew I was over my plan. I'm over my plan almost every month. And they cut off my phone. They cut off all of my family members' phones. And until I could get to a store and finally get it fixed, which was like a day later, I had no phone use.
That's
wow.
another interesting aspect.
Customer abuse on a
Yep.
like a, you know, that's life-threatening if you got to make a 911 call.
Yep.
That was crazy. And then I had a bank thing happen, which we talked about too, where you know, this bank, they tell me I'm their best customer. Okay, I'm their best customer, my branch. And I get a phone call saying, you know, you got to call this. You have 2 days. You don't call, we're not going to give you banking services. You can't use the ATM machine. No, somebody's name. That's all they say. And it turns out we're having FiRe. And because we had been using a lot of credit cards, we wrote some checks, they're going to cut off our banking services. Because we're using them. Right. Because we're their best customer in both cases.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the problem, I think, in the bank example, because I have the same phenomena, right? Anytime I put money through my bank account that's aberrative, I get a communication from my bank who fundamentally is wondering if I'm a drug dealer. And why did I have such an...
And you're not, on the record, you're not a drug dealer.
I'm not a drug dealer. Okay. And so as a result, but they ask me the same thing every time.
Yeah.
And it's because of the compliance apps. I mean, they're now liable for people that actually have money that go through the account. And so the problem is none of these are customer-friendly examples. Right. And the people that can work their way through that, tying it back to the beginning of the question, is the people that can do that will gain share, and the people that can't will lose share.
Well, imagine if they had the same compliance laws for either phone companies or banks, but instead of what we just described, you get a personal phone call. They don't cut off your stuff, first of all. That's not the threat. And then they say, Mark, you know, we want to help you out, and we recognize this thing. Could we introduce you to a larger account? Or could we put you in a special category where it happens automatically? Or all you have to do is touch this on your phone. We don't have to call you.
Yeah. This is a lot harder. By the way, I'm giving you examples that are harder to execute than what I'm describing. So just so I'm fair to the people that we're talking about, the average age of an application in this country of the companies that we're talking about is roughly 20 years. So when you subtract 20
so
from
the whole internet and the whole mobile apps thing.
So imagine you built this app that we're talking about, this billing app in a phone company, probably was built circa 1994. It works at one thing very well. It does get the bill out every month on time. Now you're asking it to do things. When it was built, there was no search, there was no social. None of the things we're talking about existed at the time of the architecture. So the complexity.
But why shouldn't they have to live in the same world that we have to live in? Why don't they rewrite their apps?
So yes,
using Oracle software.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Mark. That said, all I'm trying to tell you is that when you're running a big outfit, I'll switch to running a big outfit, which you started with earlier, right? The ability to innovate and deliver simultaneously as a big company, well, I'm sure it's easy to sort of talk about. It's harder to actually execute. Yeah. So this whole thing of I got to deliver EPS every month, I got to keep the trains running, and I got to innovate while I do it. So in most cases, most of our customers are saying, listen, I got to save money. I have no money. Go back, go check the growth rate of the phone companies. They're flat. Now I got to take money out so that I can spend money to innovate so that I can then eventually thrive. Mm-hmm. And operationally, that's a tougher task than the word that took me the time to say those words.
The time from Accenture, I've learned the times when you need to invest competitively, the most, if you can get the most bang for your buck, is when the times are the worst. When they're the toughest.
Is there anybody from Accenture here?
There is, actually. Gene, are you here?
Well, I mean this in the most thoughtful way, but that's why those people are at Accenture, right? Because it's easier to say that than it is to
find
do
the
it.
Money. Okay.
So, I mean, I always love this stuff of like, hey, yeah, I'll tell you the idea. Just fix this. Just grow revenue and take out expenses.
Well,
okay, wow.
Another
Wish I'd have thought of that. God, brilliant.
Operating guy.
Brilliant.
Another way to do this would be, you look at MCI when they came into the pool, right? You remember this. And they took 25% share in 1 year by doing a billing system that AT&T couldn't change or match. Sure. They did Friends in the Family. They literally overnight became a 25% market share phone company. And so you'd think in this world that you're describing, as we go to the IoT, as we have a mobile apps world and all that stuff, these are big changes technically. And the guy who either comes in new or comes in again with an investment and actually embraces that stuff while everybody else is not investing, will get 25% market share. Yeah,
I mean, again, back to the, because I know, and you don't have to have any empathy with guys that are running outfits, but 25% of the Fortune 500, if you went back 20 years ago, only 25% of the Fortune 100 are left. And there's a reason for that, because the stuff you're talking about is really hard.
Yeah.
And so the ability to go deliver and change simultaneously is the reason why my industry, the tech industry, is loaded with one-trick ponies. You know, the ability to invent the second trick after the first trick is really hard. So again, I'm not trying. I agree with you strategically. I just think the execution of it is more work than one thinks.
Right. So I think this leads us right to a question I wanted to ask you. I know that you're working on this like this week. You have a new marketing cloud?
We do.
And the whole idea of, I mean, most people think of the cloud as this kind of repository, right? But now this is a cloud as a service, basically.
Right. Marketing as a service.
Yeah. So could you describe that?
Well, I think you're right. The cloud has got 3 levels. There's a platform as a service, people getting tools to build things and so forth. There's infrastructure, which is service, which is just storing my stuff, storing my compute, storing my data, et cetera. And then there's applications as a service, or more commonly referred to as SaaS. In SaaS, there are various disciplines. There's HR, there's sales, there's financials, there's, you know, if you will, traditional ERP, and then marketing, which has become, you know, quickly a very important subject. It's not only is it not so much new for us, but we're the leading marketing automation SaaS company in the world, and it really is doing 2 things: automating that B2C process and that B2B process. Yep.
And so we should start looking at cloud as a actual source of services, not just. It's just kind of fascinating. It's a large-scale shift from a hosting kind of mentality to a service provision mentality. And we've seen it on small scale, and I think what you're talking about is on a very large scale.
Hosting is very different from SaaS, in the true, pure concept of how you look at it. Yeah.
And so when people start to use, when you go to CMOs or whoever you're going to go to with this product, what's the sell? Why would they?
Well, let me use our own company, right? So our CMO has the problem of, you know, she's got a big budget, a lot of money that we spend trying to generate leads. She's got the problem of we spend a lot of money to get roughly 1% qualified leads out of all that money, which is a very low return. But by the way, it's fairly industry standard. We then get the 1% leads to our sales force fairly slowly. So we get them to them in like 4 days. And all of our salespeople will tell you, quit sending me all these old leads.
4 days old.
They're 4 days old, and the general data would tell you once you get outside of a few hours, you've sort of lost the motivation that caused the person to even respond in the first place.
I want to just underline that, because that's an amazing thing. I think we said 2 hours, or is it 3 hours?
We've moved it from 4 days to now 2 to 3 hours, but it really is only a 2 or 3 hour window you've got. So that's not as good as I'm making it sound.
You have a 2 hour window after that person is touched
Roughly.
for them to emotionally recall, I guess that's how I'd put it, in a positive way, so that if you touch them again, you're still
they may even forget why it is they actually responded.
Wow. 2 hours.
When you go look at the data, it tells you that most people's attention span, outside of 2 hours, the interest level starts to go like this. And so they've moved on to some other thing, or they found some other way to,
I think that's incredible,
to spend their time. So you have to get, the thing is about the lead is you have to respond
incredible. Quickly. So anybody who's in sales, none of you sell things, but if you were selling things, 2 hours. I think that's amazing. Okay, keep going.
Well, no, I mean, the core for us was we generate a lot of leads. We generate a lot of leads after spending a lot of money. I'm not so interested in generating more leads.
You want more sales.
I want more business.
Yeah.
And so the reality is I don't care if my leads went down. Mm-hmm. I would like to get my response rate or my qualified lead percent up.
Yep.
And I would like to get my response time down.
So back to the cloud. That's the technology for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way, again, the best way you can do it is to automate the process to where the minute you respond, I can immediately now know who I was trying to get to and the path to get from who responded to who can execute about it and who responded.
See, we have a different system. We go to a trade show, we gather cards, and then we take them home. We put them on the dresser in the bedroom, and then they get lost for a little while. Then we find them again, then we take them to the office and we put them on the desk. And then we get lost for a little, and then we find them again. And then it's about 2 weeks later because we had to do some stuff first.
How's that working for you?
Not good.
Yeah.
No, it's good.
Doesn't sound good.
I don't think they even know who you are when you call out 2 weeks. So you think you're at 2 hours now or 3 hours? You can actually do that.
Well, no. Let me go back to why it works that way. It's the work up front, because more times than not, you go out and get a bunch of leads, and it's sort of a spray and pray sort of approach. I'm just going to spray a bunch of stuff out there and pray I get a response. And when I do, I say, oh, I got the response. Then I spend time to figure out who responded. And then I try to figure out then to my sales automation system. If you're a big scale company, we have 30,000 salespeople, so we have a lot of choices about who to send that lead to. Then we've got to align who that is, the territory, and so the best process is to automate that up front so that I actually know who I sent it to. I know Mark Anderson, and I know if Mark Anderson responded, Mark Hurd would be the one to talk to Mark Anderson. Okay, Mark Anderson responded, boom, I immediately know in milliseconds that occurred, and then I can immediately act upon your lead.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you,
it works.
Yeah, it works. And you, I'm going to wrap around this. You have, I think, 4 companies or more that you've purchased to kind of bring technology into this effort.
Yes.
So people who are using this cloud-based service are going to get the complete. And I'm not trying to do a sales job for you, but I'm trying to describe it.
Okay, you're doing good so far.
They're going to get the complete, menu of services that they would need as a CMO for a different company.
Yeah, and I would say that to your point, B2B is different from B2C.
Yeah.
So in B2B, I can do what I said because I integrate directly to a sales automation system that automates my sales force. In B2C, much more difficult because more times than not, I'm not dealing with a sales force.
Right.
And I'm also dealing with a lot more leads.
Yep.
So there's a lot of different complexities depending on what you're dealing with.
Right, right. Is this the future? So do you see doing this not just with marketing, but with a whole bunch of things that you guys are offering already? But will these things all be cloud-based someday? Is that the whole?
I don't know about, listen, I think the cloud thing is complicated too. I think it's a little different. We talk about, us in the U.S., talk about like everything is like the U.S. And outside the U.S., there are different geographies, particularly Western Europe, that are much more centric about where data is, the sovereignty of data. It's a little different by industry. Financial services, healthcare have different regulations about where data sits. Most regulatory bodies look at data in the physical sense as opposed to the virtual sense. So they tend to say, I don't know anything about computing, but I want to know that computer has that data on that floor. And so that has some sets of limitations on sort of cloud. But I think the real key is applications, the new, nimble, faster view of applications is going to be the ability to get on more standard code. Part of the problem, to make this more complicated, of the 20-year-old apps, is more than 50% of those apps have been heavily modified. And so the ability for them to get changed the way you described is almost, it's extremely costly.
Yes.
In the cloud, let's take the example of marketing automation. We would deliver 3 code drops per year. So it's standard code. You're not going to change it. If you don't like it, just don't buy it.
Right.
Because we're not going to let you change it.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're now relying on our R&D as opposed to your IT budget.
Right.
And therefore, your ability to innovate changes dramatically, because even if you pay some Accenture or somebody to modify that app, the only way you keep innovating is you have to keep paying to modify that app, and when you do, you no longer can rely on the base code. So I think it's not just SaaS. It's not just the fact that it's SaaS and it's cloud. The real issue is it's simply easier, and then it really changes the paradigm from your IT. Yeah. To our R&D.
Right. It's a big budget change for the CIO internally.
And speed of innovation goes up, go up dramatically.
Yeah. Well, I think the whole spaghetti code thing, there's still in COBOL someplace relying in the back of some code.
Listen, there's
Fortran.
The mainframe market is there's still a mainframe. I mean, how many years ago were people saying there'd be no mainframes, and there's still mainframes? Yeah. So there's still a lot of change that has to go in core IT.
And IBM is selling those mainframes today.
I'll leave
Never mind. So it strikes me that this is all part of the same story, because you offload that budget from your own CIO onto the cloud. Then it becomes there's almost a friction state where, if you're describing where the innovation happens, you guys are doing the innovation in the don't change this code, right? And they're doing the innovation on the stuff that they're going to run contiguous with that somehow in-house. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'd be.
So it changes innovation, right?
Yeah, just to give you an idea, maybe I give you some context. Every code drop we have release to release probably has a couple thousand new features. So imagine that as part of if you had a subscription fee of $1 and the $1 subscription fee never changed, you'd be getting new features for the same $1. And I think that's not just true with us. That's how the industry is evolving. And that, as opposed to you having to pay somebody to modify code to get that improvement, you're now getting that as part of your core base subscription. So I think it's going to be attractive, not just because it's modern code, not because it's software that you're getting a URL off the internet, but you're also getting a paid for, frankly, innovation budget as part of the subscription.
So I think that we've hit something that's really interesting. So while you guys do that, and I've seen it already, I know that corporations are greatly relieved financially by offloading that cost. There's a huge amount of stuff, spaghetti stuff, they can offload, never see it again, move forward, become more modern. You take over that part. That's a done deal. Everybody knows that. That's great. But I think in terms of innovation rates and types of innovation, that's the beneficial result. It's not just a financial result. It's what you're describing. Yeah. So a corporation now is free to be more innovative in their departmental level requests for solutions of different types than they could before.
I think it's a huge part of the value proposition. Yeah.
It's an amazing thing, right? So you're actually liberating innovation while you're doing the other thing.
You're lowering costs and increasing innovation, hopefully at the same time.
Yeah. That's totally cool.
Yeah. I think it'll happen.
Yeah, okay. So let's I want to go back to security for a minute because that's a huge thing. And you guys have a product which is called Java. And Java has been through ups and downs. We all know this. It's arguably one of the most important products of its kind in the world. I know it's got like jillions of customers. Everybody in this room probably has Java on some machine or other. And you guys have been really good, I think, at responding to the problems of yesteryear. I get updates like all the time, constantly. It's got to be a major concern to have that responsibility of owning Java and providing the world with a secure form of that. And that's just a sub-story, I think, of how do you increase security as this stuff expands? How do you do that?
Well,
can you do that?
Well, I'll go to the broader picture. I mean, on security, I mean, I think we get our database gets attacked every day.
Yeah, right.
And to my knowledge, I'm going to look over Judith. I think I'm going to say this again. To my knowledge, no Oracle database has ever been penetrated. To my knowledge,
no kidding.
So there's been many attempts, but most of the people, well, and again, I've said it enough that if somebody knew, I guarantee you I'd know. Yeah. So again, we look at security a little different than most. A lot of people are trying to secure the perimeter. We're trying to secure the data. Mm-hmm. And so we don't think anybody really wants your iPhone. You know, when they get it, they're really trying to get to the database. And I think it's what you see in particularly some of these retail attacks. And I think it's not going to be a good message for some of the retailers that have been hit, but I think it's a credit, at least to us so far, that the way they saw the route to get in to get the data is through a satellite node. So they fundamentally went in through the store. Mm-hmm. And so the attack that went on in one of the big retailers in this country was really at the store to get credit card data. Yeah. And again, that's very different from getting into the core database itself. So listen, we try to be as innovative as we can. Clearly, the bad guys are innovative.
Are you spending more per year on security-related?
Well, we have a very large security budget. We have a very large security practice. Mm-hmm. And we try very hard to make sure our customers, we do an assessment for them of the security of their data and database, particularly if it's Oracle, and yeah, I mean it's a core part of the business, but it is not going to let up. So
I think, yeah,
we're just in an era where because of all the data that's out there and all of the things that we put into the domain and all the things that sit in these databases. There's going to be there's no shortage of people wanting to attack.
Just the opposite, I think. Do you see over time that the net experience will be more secure or less secure? Or is there some better way of asking that?
I think it's just a complicated subject, Mark. Yeah. I hate to make a generality. I think it depends where you are, what you're talking about. Are you talking about core databases? Are you talking about networks? And
so we're going to look at a menu of choices. We're going to say the Oracle thing is secure, but this thing over here I have no idea about. I'm not going to go there. I am going to go here. I won't use that tool. I will use this tool.
And listen, we're all very global. I thought that some of this, careful not to be too controversial, but this thing that came out this week about some people trying to hack into companies. I mean, this is going on every single day. And all of us have operations all across the world. We all know
that it's happening.
Yeah, there's no secrets here.
Yeah.
So it's we all know, and we all know that there are people that aren't who they say they are that are actually even in those companies.
Right.
And so it's a constant battle, and I don't think it will let up.
Yeah, I'm sure it won't. So if you have a question, feel free to stand up and come to the microphone. And I'm not surprised we have questions. I'll ask you one more while this fellow's coming up. So we've watched the space program. We just had a very good set of NASA-related discussions. But we're having this tiff for a moment with Russia, which has led to a very interesting situation for astronauts and people who would like to go to the space station and companies here who only use Russian rockets to go there. And so the sanctions come in and all that kind of stuff. Does this affect Oracle? It
would be something that I wouldn't want to comment on in quiet period. It would be misunderstood.
On a larger scale, do political events have that effect?
Can.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, do you have a question?
Thank you. Mark, thanks for attending again. Appreciate the candor. I'm Jason Spivak. I'm the CEO of a company called Invoco. We are cloud marketing automation for the inbound phone call channel.
Right.
So I wanted to tie together a few of the points you made here and ask you a question around that. You mentioned there are more phones than people in the world. Mark, I think you said that. You talked about the growing importance of marketing automation and the growth of the Oracle Marketing Cloud. You mentioned how your own inbound leads convert in the 1% range. And some of the frustrations you have as a business leader around the time it takes for those quality leads to get to the salespeople.
Yep.
So my question for you is, does anyone ever buy an Oracle enterprise product without at least talking with someone on the phone first? And given that, how important do you see inbound phone calls from customers and prospects as part of that marketing automation landscape?
That's a fascinating question. So yes, I first of all, it is what I said. So I think that's a very good description of that. We actually, in our sales force, mirror our sales force with a person on the phone and a person in the territory. So think of us that we have a territory with 10 accounts, and Mark and I literally would share the territory. Mark would be on the phone, I'd be in the field. Now, not all those calls are quote unquote inbound. Some are inbound, some are outbound, but it's really more of a buddy system. Does anybody buy something without talking to somebody on the phone? The answer is yes. Does more and more of our business become a conversation that's really more of a dialogue? It's an ongoing relationship, and therefore, over time, there are things that get done, and we think more and more things that can get done telephonically than perhaps always having to have an in-person dialogue. So one of the only companies that I know of that's really evolved to this mirroring concept. So our sales force is very organically driven. We literally hire from the college campus. So we think of us hiring 500-600 kids from the college campus a year. We evolve them through that teleselling process. And once Mark's done a good job for 2 or 3 years, he's going to take my job or take another job like mine, being a field rep. And so we really try to build this process, and the way we find to start them is train them, get them into the teleselling capability, then move them through our field organization. Thank you.
Thanks again, Mark, for coming. My name is Scott Tierney. I'm with Google Capital, and I had a question about Hadoop and your thoughts on what the impact in the enterprise will be 5 years from now and how Oracle works with that community.
Yeah,
I know you have partnerships.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got a Hadoop appliance, and then we've got Hadoop connectors that actually sit into our core system. So I think for the movement of data, particularly unstructured type data, I think Hadoop's a valuable tool. And I think as long as, again, this is the problem is we've got an imperfect world now in the sense that we've got lots of structured data, very important structured data, things like, financial transactions, airplane tickets, et cetera. We've got lots of unstructured data, and the ability to bring those two pieces of data together in the form of making decisions. You're going to find more and more of these great big data stories are a combination of unstructured data and structured data. And so I think Hadoop has particularly Hadoop connectors have a big role potentially in the way IT evolves. And this data thing, I don't think it's going to slow down.
No. Plenty of pie for everybody, I think. Yes.
Hi, I'm Mary Jessie. Ivy Corp, we're actually a fire starter company at the conference. And we have an enterprise messaging, very unique platform. And I was particularly intrigued by what you said about, it's very difficult for a very large company to innovate and keep the eye on the ball in terms of operations. And I've seen that to be true over and over again. The dilemma for a small technology company, we have unique technology, And, we can see direct application. I mean, ironically, you brought it up today where I want a personalized notice from my service provider. That's exactly what we're, offering. And so what we hear is, okay, you need a customer that really wants this and is working with Oracle customer or, a large company. And we had that situation in Seattle with a utility customer. He said, oh, we're doing an outage management system. We've selected Oracle, and this is a perfect add-on, and they don't already have it in the product. But it's very difficult to penetrate and get to Oracle when they're so focused on deploying that product that's just been purchased. So how does that happen? I mean, what's the magic answer to try and bring innovative technologies to products when they're focused on, making that sale, making that customer happy?
Yeah. Well, listen, I think this is a fascinating question because I'm going to answer it in a horrible way. There is no magic. So I think all this stuff we're talking about, that we've talked about today, this is really hard work. The stuff to innovate, take cost out, to execute day to day, and this is just hard. And so to your point at Oracle, we've got 130,000 people. I've got big news. Not all execute perfectly. And we try very hard to keep them, going north. Some want to go northwest, some want to go northeast, some just stay put, right? But we're trying to get the whole place moving north. By the way, that's not unique to Oracle. It's unique to any company. The biggest job you have is leadership, is to keep people headed in the right direction with a similar message, well-trained, well-focused, and they execute. Now, behind it, you have to have a group of people that are preparing them to execute. They're innovating. We're thinking about, we spend $5 billion a year in R&D. Now, not all of our R&D is always perfect, but our yield is, if you looked at our portfolio, I'm very proud of the yield of our R&D over the past several years. Now, that said, we look for partnerships, but you've got the same problem with us that you'd have with that customer in Seattle, which is to get through the noise, you have to work hard to get the right connection to get through that noise. I mean, one process is you can get to me. That'll get through at least some noise.
Can I
but
give
I'll
you
send
my card then. And
you can.
Okay.
You can. But remember, I'll send it into the noise.
Okay.
And
it might get there better than if I said it in the noise. I've tried many times.
I think you're right. They'll at least what given it to me was you'll at least read it, but then the reader will have a choice. And well, I don't think he's really serious. I don't really know. I got other things going on. So it's hard work. But yeah, give me your card or we'll get it and
Yep. Thank you.
We'll take a look. Thank you.
My name is Linda Galindo with Are You Accountable? And I am...
That's not a question, right? That's a company. Oh.
It's a company. You're first to market. Your technology is the best. But you both gave examples of when it boils down to it, if you break the relationship because you're not sensitive to the need of the customer, they'll go somewhere, even if it's less viable technology or slower, because they want that personal relationship built into everything. So they'll come back if you make a mistake or you don't provide service if you relate. So how do you put that in your company's culture so that everybody is in that mindset of every contact counts, but if you blow it, they'll stay with us if we have that relationship?
Alice, this is horribly hard stuff. I mean, when you get to be a big company and you're successful, the arrogance factor can creep in, right? Which is your point. We have great technology. Buy it. and the fact is, what customers, if you ask the biggest complaint I get about Oracle, it's that I don't feel I know everything Oracle has. I don't feel I know everything Oracle does. I'm not sure I have the best of all of Oracle's thoughts to help me innovate, to help me save money. And those are issues we face every day, which is how to take the aggregation of our portfolio, the aggregation of our capabilities, to really intersect those with our customers' problems, many of which we've talked about today, and then how we help them innovate, how we help them get more efficient. And we're good at it in some places and not good at it in others. And I think that's the same problem that all the companies we have are describing, which is, in our case, we're very proud of our technology. I'm sure that comes across in lots of things we do. We feel great about our position. We have 30,000 salespeople. They're organized by product. Now, let me make sure I get this across to at least how I think of sales forces. I've done this way too long. The most productive salespeople are those that are one product salespeople. The problem when you're Oracle and you have 80 products is you have a bunch of salespeople that show up. And at their lunatic worst, you see all these characters show up, and nobody has context for here's the relationship with insert big name company here, and then how do we get all of this aggregated into a better answer together? And that's the battle we face every day, and we're working hard on it. And I think right now, if you went to the market, we've made improvements in it. We just have a lot more work to do to get to that end. And so for us, we've got, listen, the IT enterprise market is $900 billion. We have $45 billion. So in spite of popular belief, we only have 5% market share. It just happens to be a strategic 5%. But we can't find 500,000 more customers. Well, we could, but since we have the big guys, we'd have to find an incalculable number of more customers to equal the 45 billion. We have to get 5% per customer to 10. That's the only way we double the company. So it's in our DNA that maybe not in all of our behavior, but it's certainly into our DNA that we have to please a customer, thrill them, delight them, or we don't get more business. The execution of that is what we have to make, consistent and ubiquitous across our sales org.
And are there things that are structural inside Oracle that, lead to that?
So. This is going to sound horrible the way I say it probably, but 200 customers buy 40% of the IT. 500 customers buy a little less than 50. 2,000 customers buy about mid-50s of all the 900 billion. So we're trying very hard to get the biggest customers first. I'm sure, this is not like, I had to go back to grad school to figure this out, right? So this is just, how do we get coverage in all the big guys, and then how do we make that consistent through everything we do? And our customer sat levels are up as a result of that.
And are sales guys rewarded for customer satisfaction?
We don't pay them on that. So we don't. If you pay on customer satisfaction, I've done this too often, Mark. Yeah. If you pay on customer satisfaction, you will now all of a sudden, how do you survey that? And then all of a sudden, Mark, you're going to get surveyed.
Yeah.
Let's go have dinner.
Yeah, right.
And so
when
you start paying on things like customer sat, now what we do measure on is 3-year customer satisfaction in related to the share of wallet that you have. So we actually measure the combined metric, but not that metric in isolation.
All right, good. We're good. Yes.
Mark, Phil Moyer from Safeguard. It seems like we all agree that data is exploding. Processing is exploding, but we seem to keep solving the big data problem the same way. Centralize all the data and then you get a result. I'm curious about how Oracle thinks about pushing itself out to the edge, and data where it's most volatile, keep it where it is, and centralize answers.
Yeah, I think, listen, it depends what the edge is, because depending on the device, or the thing that's a sensor that's gathering data, I'm not sure you're going to want me to push analytics out to a sprinkler system, or to a head in a farm, that's actually doing watering of a crop. That said, what you're going to see in applications as they go forward is embedded analytics. More and more for the operational analytic part of the job. So, for example, historically, you're exactly right. You would get a bunch of transactional data. Let's take a customer system. You would then take that data. You would then mart it into a centralized. I used to run a company called Teradata, way back when, and I was very young at the time. But you would mart this data, and then you would have users do the analysis. But it would be separate from the transactional system. If you get into the core SaaS applications that Mark is describing, the analytics are actually embedded in the app. So that now, that doesn't change the fact that you're going to have some strategic things you're going to want to look at offline, but many of those day-to-day, because for example, you take a phone company, we've got on that example. The churn on most of the big phone companies is about 30%. Most of the churn occurs, I think, in a 3-minute phone call from me to the call center saying, I'm not happy, I'm leaving. And the person on the phone talking to me churns, by the way, at 40% per year. And you've got 3 minutes to convince me to stay. And you, frankly, may not know anything about me other than I'm upset. So how do I quickly get data into that person's hands that allows them to try to convince me to stay? And so getting those analytics into the core app makes a huge difference, as opposed to me having to go back to a huge big data warehouse in the sky and wait forever to get an answer. So I think you'll see more onboard, you will see more integrated analytics. I don't think that'll stop the fact that it's sort of corporate, whatever you want to describe. There'll be a set of analysis work that'll still probably be separate from the core transaction apps.
Okay, we're done. Everybody's asked their question. You've done a great job up here. Thank you very
Mark.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And